And here we go. Welcome to our monthly mindfulness in April. Nice to say April, isn't it? And happy spring to you all. You're enjoying a little bit better weather. I know it's still been kind of cool, but that's part of what we practice mindfulness for, right? Is not to have these automatic reactions and kind of habitual kinds of responses to the way things are. And today we're going to be talking about stress. As you can see, is it good or bad? You might think to yourself, what's the answer for yourself to that question? But I'm going to give you some interesting information and some ways that we can help ourselves kind of change our relationship to stress and do some practices. And again, it's all about practice so that we get better at it. But I hope maybe I can give you some good information to, in a sense, change your mind about stress. All right, so I do have everybody muted, and if you want to speak up, you can. I'll pause at a couple points. You can also use the chat feature as we move along. So to start, let's assess your stress. This is a quiz that you can take. I'm not going to do that right now, but this is something that when you get the slides in, I'll send them out later. You can take this assessment on your stress level. But for now, just simply rank yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being no stress whatsoever, 10 being super high level of stress. So you're, really, overwhelmed and stressed out. And just give yourself a number, whatever it is. Doesn't really matter. You don't have to share it. But after we try a few things, you might do that again, perhaps at the end of today's session, or you might try some of these things that we'll talk about today for the next few days up to a week, and just see, maybe you can gauge for yourself, are some of these things helping, and what works for you specifically. So as I said, I will send the slides out and the recording link, and if you have to leave for some reason, or you couldn't catch the whole thing, or you want to review it, you'll have that. So what I have the list of everybody who's signed up on LMS, and that's who I'll be sending it to. If you didn't do it that way, just let me know if you want to get that. You can let me know in the chat, or you can send me an email afterwards, and just to make sure that I do include you on that email. All right, so you got your stress level. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to do something called the 3-minute breathing space, just to kind of get ourselves centered. And this is a quick practice that I often teach when we do the multi-session classes, but it's something that can be done A, in response to a stressor, or B, just routinely so that you get good at it. It's very easy, and I'm going to give you a shortened version of it too. So to start, just becoming aware of how things are in this moment, kind of asking yourself the question, what's happening right now? Or what is my experience right now? You might adopt an intentional posture. You can close your eyes if you like. You don't have to, though. But bringing your awareness to your inner experience, asking yourself that question, what's happening right now, or how am I doing right now? And just notice what thoughts are going through the mind. And just acknowledging thoughts as mental events, perhaps putting them into words. And in the same way, what feelings are here, being aware of the general mood, or if you can identify any specific feelings that you notice, even if they're unpleasant, just acknowledging them. And then what body sensations are here right now? Perhaps quickly scanning the body to pick up on any sensations of tightness or bracing, or just acknowledging sensations that are that you're aware of. And then the second step is gathering or redirecting our attention to focus on the breath. So just being aware of the physical sensations of the breathing itself, moving in close to that sense of feeling the breath wherever you feel it most directly, but that might be at the nose or the chest or the stomach. But see if you can breathe deeply enough so that you do feel it at the stomach. Often we're just breathing kind of in a shallow way. So I want you to take a little bit deeper of a breath so that you feel the breath, feeling the sensations of each breath, following the breath all the way in and all the way out, using the breath to anchor yourself into the present. And then the third part is expanding the field of awareness around the breathing so that it includes a sense of the body as a whole, your posture, your facial expression, maybe even what's around you, your surroundings. And if you become aware of any sensations of discomfort or tension, just take your awareness there by breathing into them on the in-breath, and then breathe out from those sensations and softening and opening with the out-breath. And as best you can, bring this expanded awareness with you to the next moments of your day. And that's the 3-minute breathing space. And again, that might be something you might want to continue trying as a quick practice, kind of in the moment. Here's something that's very kind of similar in structure, but it's sometimes called a 1-minute breathing space or stop. And again, the S is, sorry, there's my phone. Let me turn that ringer down. So the S is to stop and take stock when you feel stressed or unsettled. Just bringing yourself into the present moment, asking yourself that same question, what's going on for me right now? And then this is just kind of a shortened version. So then T, take a mindful breath or two, feeling the breath like we did before, putting your full attention on the breathing on each in-breath and out-breath, allowing the breath to anchor you into the present. And then the O is to be open and observe. Here we check into what's going on with thoughts. What are you saying to yourself? What's going on in the mind? Feelings, even if it's just kind of a general sense of what the feeling is. And then B, or rather, that body. What sensations do you notice in the body? Scanning through, just seeing what's present moment sensations. And then the P is then proceed. Proceed with this kind of new awareness. This does kind of change our perspective a little bit. So that's just kind of a quicker version of the 3-minute breathing space. So again, you might try either one of these in response to a stressor, or just try them. Try them in different places and different times, different transition points throughout the day. But as we know, what happens is we have this kind of monkey mind, right? Especially when we're stressed and there's lots going on and there's a lot of external noise. There's a lot going on. You know, if you just turn on the news, for example, there's a lot going on in the world around us that's pretty distressing. And so monkey mind can easily crop up. So we might feel a lot of thoughts going on, a lot of feelings. We might even feel a little bit overwhelmed and swept away. And that's what monkey mind kind of is. It's sort of like, you know, just too much going on in the mind. And that's what we're going to learn to kind of counteract. Because what happens when we do this, we do get kind of caught up in it. We get swept away. And especially if we're on autopilot, we have really little control. And when we're on autopilot, our buttons get pushed a lot more easily. So whatever stressor is happening, whatever you notice, whether it's a personal thing going on or something out in the world that's stressing you out, this sort of monkey mind can easily surface. Or, as Mark Twain said, my life has been filled with terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened. And I like this quote. If you've been in my classes, as I think many of you have, I use this a lot because it is very easy to project into the future and worry about things that haven't happened yet. And we do kind of catastrophize some of these things, especially if we allow that monkey mind to get out of control and sort of going haywire. And as we know, our mindfulness practices, that's really what it's all about, is trying to rein that in, trying to come into the present moment so that we're not projecting into the future, or we're not dwelling on the past either. Sometimes we do that as well. We rehash things that have happened and we, kind of replay them in our minds over and over again. And that's not helpful either. So what I wanted to talk about is stress and how it can really get out of control. I mean, for many of us, we've been taught that stress is harmful to our health and to our well-being. And I think this is what happens. So I came across this and try to represent this in this way. We have a stressor, and how does that stressor or number of stressors turn into chronic stress? When we get into a chronic stress or burnout, ongoing, overwhelming kinds of stress, how does that's usually where it gets harmful to us. Well, here's the sort of the answer to the equation. Stressor plus rumination, so that idea of catastrophizing or ruminating over something, and or self-criticism. We can get into that habit as well. In fact, I think most of us do that. It's pretty easy to that inner critic comes up, especially when we're under stress, and that creates problems. Or we can be stoic about something. We can tough it out. That might be our go-to strategy. And that does help us in some circumstances. So I'm not saying not to be tough and not to be resilient, but stoicism also refers to sort of denying that those conditions exist, denying that they exist, and or ignoring them, suppressing them. And that doesn't help either, because when we do that, that usually just internalizes it and contributes to, especially if there is ongoing stress and there's lots of stressors, big stressors, it just really builds up, and it's eventually going to come out and can result in things like anxiety or depression. So what do we do about this? Well, let me present this. I've talked about this before, but this model, I think, and this way of talking about it, hopefully will help. How do we turn stress into a strength? Well, the simple answer is to reframe it. So they did this study with close to 30,000 adults, and it was a long-term, like 8-year study. And they found that people who view stress as a challenge rather than a threat completely negated the negative effect of chronic stress on their longevity. In other words, those who had very stressful lives were 43% more likely to die even, so their mortality rate went up, when they perceived that stress as being harmful to their health. So in other words, our beliefs, our belief system and what we've been conditioned, and our beliefs and our thoughts about stress have a lot to do with how that stress impacts us. On the other side of the coin, those who believe that stress was not harmful were actually 17% less likely to die, even though they experienced high levels of stress. Pretty interesting, right? So now when you get the slides, there is a link here to a TED Talk called How to Make Stress Your Friend. You might have watched this before, but it's about, I think, 13 or 14 minutes, and it explains the whole thing. especially in the first part of it. So even if you just watch the first 7 or 8 minutes, you get a really good explanation of the study. But what they also did was they taught people how to get better at stress, and how to change that stress into, instead of stress as a harmful mindset, into stress is an enhancing mindset, and that it can be trained. And there's been a lot of research on this. In fact, there's a couple of good books on it, that I've referenced before. But if you want to read more on it, just let me know. I'm happy to give you a couple of recommendations. But the bottom line is, well, I'll get to that in a moment. But when you interpret stress as helpful rather than harmful, it actually changes your body's response to that stress. And in the study that they did, they actually, the people that they taught how to get better at stress, they found that they had an even better cardiovascular profile. So even though there is a stressor and the fight or flight system still activates, the physiological changes are more adaptive and strengthening. And it helps us physically and mentally to overcome that challenge. So pretty interesting that actually they're able to see changes in the brain into that, in that way that that fight or flight reaction plays out, but also in how it affects the cardiovascular and the hormones, the stress hormones that flood the system. So just in changing this belief set about stress so that we turn it into this stress is enhancing mindset can really make a difference. And that's the reframing part of it. So the goal isn't to eliminate stress, because that's practically impossible anyway, but it's to meet it with this different lens and to reframe it, to say to yourself, this really isn't panic, although it can feel a little panicky, that fight or flight still kind of creates a little about it, but it's saying to yourself, this is preparation for it, or that stress isn't always the enemy, but sometimes that stressor and that stress response gives you the activation energy that your body needs to rise to the occasion. So you might realize that, yeah, this is the stressor is actually helping me meet that challenge. So here's the bottom line, that stress isn't inherently bad in and of itself. It's how you respond that matters. And with that right mindset, and here's the key, with practice, and I believe that our mindfulness practices are really, really helpful in doing that. Stress becomes the weight, in a sense, that like going to the gym, that strengthens the mind, that makes us more resilient. And it's like a muscle. So, mental toughness is built, not born. Although, some people might challenge that. There are some folks who are sort of naturally resilient. But even though, we all know about folks who go through difficult, challenging, and, really even traumatic circumstances, depending on how they respond to that, that can actually make them stronger and more resilient. And maybe you can relate to that. But it's this idea that when stress arises, you're kind of saying to yourself, this is training. This is giving me a chance to get better at stress. And I am getting stronger by doing that. So just to give sort of a practical example, we all know that there's a lot of uncertainty and stress going on in the world around us on so many different fronts, right? And it can be very unsettling and stressful, and there's a lot of VUCA. I've talked about this before, of the V is volatility, U is uncertainty, C is complexity, and the A is ambiguity. So when that happens, we get, obviously, we react to that. We get pretty stressed out. And I think all of us can relate to that. So quick little way of dealing with that is to take a pause, take 3 breaths to pause. First breath in, feel the breath itself, allow yourself to slow down a little bit, let the breath calm you. Second breath is for you. And so whatever you need in the moment, whether it's care or compassion or support, or maybe just being a bit more calm and relaxed. And then the third breath is to breathe out for others. all those who you worry about in the world who are affected and troubled by this particular event or series of events. Once you do that, then you can really step back from and feel your feelings in a more sort of objective way. You can acknowledge them more easily, you can label them, and then you can begin to educate yourself. Go to trusted sources. And of course, that's a whole other story. Where do you get your news? Where do you get your information? We have to be careful, right? And so, but you can then choose where to go and in limited doses. So be careful about, how much you're allowing in, because that can be stressful too. Then you can begin to resource yourself, ask yourself, what do you need? Plan for yourself and others. What's one thing you can do, for example, and then put that action plan into place. So that's just kind of a good way to think about it in real life. What this comes down to is this quote: the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. And again, our mindfulness practice really helps us do that. When we start with our mindfulness practices, we start with focusing on the breath or the body. Those become our sort of anchor to return to, sort of a home base to get back in touch with the present moment. But what we're going to do in today's meditation is we're going to notice thoughts, even though sometimes thoughts can be distracting and they can pull us away from the present moment. We're going to notice thoughts, but we're going to practice sort of being aware of them from a little bit of distance. And then we're going to bring up a stressor. So I'll ask you in the meditation. So you might think of something sort of not too heavy, not too intense. And we'll practice some ways to view that stressor so that we can feel like we have a bit more agency or control over how we respond to it. We probably can't change the stressor itself, right? But we can change our response to it. And that's really what it comes down. And we can learn to step back from it and watch all these thoughts and all these stressors kind of going on by, sort of like clouds in the sky. All right. So let's do the practice for today. Any questions before I get started? Let me just pause for a sec. You can use the chat feature. Any questions about anything that I've covered or about what we're going to do in a second? This will be probably maybe 8-9 minutes. Okay, well, I will ask you when we're done what you thought of it. So I'm be curious to see how this meditation was for you once we finish it. So let's begin by simply sitting in a relatively upright position so that you can be upright and alert as if you're interested, but also relaxed and settled as if resting. So kind of a balance. And you can close your eyes, or if you prefer, you can keep them open slightly with a downward unfocused gaze. And first, just notice where your mind is right now, sort of like what we did in the first exercise. How are you feeling? How is your mind? What thoughts do you notice? Not to fix or analyze or problem solve, just notice so that we're not getting caught up in any thoughts or emotions, to see if you can just observe. And then notice the body sitting. We're sitting here doing nothing on purpose. And allow the body to be relaxed as you sit. And take a moment to appreciate the opportunity to just be. We don't have to do anything right now. Just coming into a state of being. Anchoring yourself in your body sitting, allowing the weight of the body to give itself up to gravity. So feel the weight of the body just sort of settling and sinking into the chair beneath you, feeling the connection your feet make with the ground, and that sense of being grounded through the feet and through your body sitting, through your arms resting. And now tuning into the breath, feeling the breath as it flows in and out, and using the breath as an anchor or a home base. Taking a couple of deeper breaths, so we're expanding and rising on the in-breath, feeling that refreshment it brings, and settling and subsiding on the out-breath, releasing and relaxing. And just feeling the breath and knowing that we can use the breath as that anchor to return to whenever we need to kind of restabilize. Because our minds do that, our minds carry us all over the place, especially if our minds are pretty busy. But for now, just bring to mind a stressor, something mild or moderate, nothing heavy or intense, maybe a 3 or up to a 6 out of 10. Okay. And get in touch with it. And notice what arises in the mind and your feelings. Again, not to fix or analyze or problem solve. Just notice what thoughts, what feelings arise. And now we're just noticing thoughts. We're not, and you can return to your anchor if you feel the need to, but for now we're just being curious about thoughts and feelings. Often they're associated. We're just noticing them. We're not getting caught up in them. We're just observing and noticing them. Sort of like just letting them flow on by, like they're in a stream and they're flowing on by, and you're on the side of the stream, on the bank of the river, just watching them float on by. And then you can also now drop down into the body and notice how and where you feel any of this in the body. And allow it to be there as best you can. And we'll say 3 simple phrases. This is stress. Stress is a part of life. And may I find ease. So we're just simply acknowledging the stress that's here, acknowledging that it's part of life, but also giving yourself a nice message. May I find ease. Staying connected to any sensations in the body, continuing to breathe, maybe repeating those phrases again. This is stress. Stress is a part of life. May I find ease. Now, sometimes it's helpful when we're stressed to say something to ourselves like, it's okay, or I'll get through this. I've done it before. You can do that for yourself if you like. And it's also helpful to bring a little bit of kindness to ourselves because it's hard to feel anxious or stressed out. And so see if you can offer kindness to yourself the way you might offer kindness to a good friend, whatever makes sense to you. Maybe putting your arm around yourself in a way, or holding your hands together, or putting your hand over your chest, or maybe saying something supportive to yourself. Whatever you need in the moment, reminding yourself that you'll get through this. You might offer words of kindness like, may I find or be at ease? May I be safe? May I know I'll be okay? Just offering this kindness and also staying connected to your feet on the floor, your hands, your legs, your body grounding you, and just notice what's present right now. And if you're feeling some peace and ease, let that flow through your body. Just enjoy that ease. And if you're not, you can say, whatever it is I'm feeling right now, may I hold this too with kindness. And you can use the breath if you like, breathing in nice and deep. And as you breathe out, if there's any tension or stress that you notice, you can, as you breathe out, just release it. Let it go. You can even sort of smile inwardly to yourself. Feel that smile spread through the face. Sort of brings kind of a lighthearted sense to the face and the body, and it even sends a signal to the nervous system to kind of relax. And let that smile spread through your face, down through your body. Maybe that helps to feel a sense of ease. And at this point, you can just let go of any of that reflection or imagery and just rest. Just rest for a moment before we close out. Don't have to do anything, just rest in this state of awareness. Just breathing gently. Again, feeling the body being grounded. And when you're ready, you can slowly begin to open the eyes. They've been closed. Maybe you want to move a little bit, stretch a little bit, and finishing the meditation, just kind of noticing what that all felt like for you. Was it helpful? Was it not? And if you feel like it, share maybe in the chat what that was like for you. We simply focused in on feeling the body, anchoring ourselves, feeling the breath, but also bringing up that stress and noticing what stress does to us. And so instead of letting a stressor bring up thoughts of worry and concern, I mean, they will, but we can reframe that. We can learn to change our perspective that with that. We can learn to send ourselves those messages. We can learn to relax the body. There's a number of things that we can do. And we tried a few different things in that towards the end of that meditation. So you might, maybe one work better than another. And that might be your go-to when you're feeling that stress. So try whatever works for you. See a few comments here. Thank you. Helpful. Good. Very good. Thank you. Definitely helpful. Those mantras are great. Yeah. Those are similar to loving kindness mantras or messages of care and kindness to ourselves. Yep. That may I find ease is a good one. Yep. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. Very helpful. Excellent. Awesome. Thanks for those uh, words of feedback. Got a few more things before we close out. But the idea here is that we can train our mindset because we do have a negativity bias, as we've talked about before in some other classes. It's more easy to focus in on negative things. That's just the way our minds have actually evolved. But the good news is that we can train our minds. We do have something called neuroplasticity. And the more we work on those kinds of practices and training, how we respond, and training to get better at stress, for example, what we practice becomes stronger. That thing on the bottom there, that really does work. In fact, not only does it become stronger in how we learn to train ourselves and that those automatic responses, but it actually becomes stronger in our brains. And so you're actually training the brain, and you're creating and strengthening neural pathways for those ways to become more stronger and resilient. Now here, you might have seen these before if you've been in classes again, so I just kind of remind you, these are simple little purposeful pauses. And so again, just to remind you, there's lots of little different things that you can do, whether it's just simple deep breathing in the moment. Savoring is stopping and smell the roses. In other words, putting your attention on positive experiences with that kind of focus, and kind of marinating in it for at least 20 or 30 seconds rather than quickly moving on. So savoring a good positive experience. The phone, haven't figured out how to turn that ringer off. And everyday mindful awareness, just a reminder about that. When we're doing those everyday routine tasks that we do, just bring your attention to that task. Don't let the mind kind of go on autopilot. Just focusing on that task. That will strengthen that ability to be present, that ability to not let the mind carry ourselves off into rumination. So those are great, little things like washing your hands or brushing your teeth or doing the laundry or whatever it is. Just bring your attention to what you're doing while you're doing it. Can strengthen that capacity to be present. And then that bottom one is all sorts of things that we typically do already to relax ourselves that we find bring us that sense of ease. So do more of that, identify those things, those activities, those hobbies, those things that you normally do. Or if you've let go of some of them, intentionally make that effort to bring them back into your playlist. Anchoring, grounding, we did a little bit of that in the meditation. Very simple techniques like just feeling your feet on the floor, imagining your feet growing roots like this tree is, just grounding yourself, just anchoring yourself with the breath or the body. Basically, what we're doing here is getting out of the head and into the body so that we're interrupting that cycle of thoughts that can bring up that monkey mind, and bringing ourselves into the body. Our body is always present. So great way to simple little technique, even on the go. You could be driving and doing this, those kinds of things. And of course, we know there's lots of different kinds of breathing. So hopefully, a couple that I've talked about before, but simple deep breathing, mental noting. So breathing, as you breathe in, you say to yourself in, out on the out breath, or calm. You can use words like that. Calm on the in breath, ease on the out breath, or may I find ease, or those kinds of mental noting techniques that we did during the meditation can all be very helpful. And just simply, there's box breathing, which is breathing to the count of 4 on the in breath. You can do this with me if you like, pausing for 4, breathing out for 4, pausing for 4 again. So it's a very kind of synchronized breathing that stabilizes our attention. So you can try that. I've talked about cyclic sighing before. That's another good one. Cyclic sighing is a 2-part in breath. So you're breathing in halfway, filling the belly, then breathing in all the way. So you fill, it's a really full in breath, filling the chest, and then breathe out with a sigh. Halfway in through the belly, the other half in, full breath, filling the chest and lungs, And then breathe out with a sigh. That's cyclic sign. If you do that 3, 5, 7 times, you'll see, I think that can be quite relaxing and calming. This is just if you want to read a good article about how effective these things are in improving our mood and anxiety. You know, they had people do this for 28 days and they compared different types of breathing. And they found that pretty much any of these breathing that we just reviewed will help us feel more positive, have fewer negative feelings, and also help reduce feelings of anxiety. But again, the key is 5 minutes a day. You got to have some routine to this. You got to build it into your schedule. And that, of course, is the trick to any of this stuff. You got to do it on somewhat of a regular basis. And they, in fact, found that in the study that participants who spent doing this on a regular basis felt better each successive day. So it sort of builds on itself. The last few slides are really just kind of just sort of bonus slides that put this in about you can also get a sense of peace by pausing, entering inward, accepting things as they are, caring for yourself and others, bringing us to a sense of ease or equanimity. And this quote by Wayne Dyer, peace is the result of retraining your mind to process life as it is, rather than as you think it should be. So think about that. It's really quite profound. And where do you find peace? You know, we all have peaceful places or people that we interact with, or peaceful things, or hobbies, or music, or listed a whole bunch here. Where do you find peace? And if there's a certain spot or person or thing that you do that brings you to that state, you know, again, find some ways to integrate that into your daily routine. Nature, of course, has been always found to be very helpful in reducing feelings of unrest, but it can bring us a sense of peace. When you get the slides, this is a live link to a bunch of brief nature videos, because they even found that even in noticing nature, this is from something called Happiness Breaks. It's a podcast on the science of happiness. And noticing nature is one of the more popular practices, and even nature videos can help. And there's a lot of scientific research that bears this out. But as you can see, just look at some of the positive effects of getting more in touch with nature. Pretty amazing. And if you want to follow up on that, these are all links to those different happiness breaks that all are, grounding yourself in nature, experiencing nature wherever you are, the healing effects of experiencing wildlife, and pausing to look at the sky. So you might want to check some of those out. And then just a quick reminder about EFR, the program that I represent. And the life cycle kits are there. There's one on stress management, actually includes a couple of really good books, and a nature mood CD and an adult coloring book. Or you might want to get one of each person can get one. So you do have to call the EFR number to ask for one, and they send it right to your home. Just a reminder about the app. We do have an app that is called M Life. There is a lot of great live and on-demand stuff on there. There is a brief little on-demand course called Strategies to Reduce Stress. So if you want to try something more, you can do that. And with that, I'll say thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate you coming on board. I'm going to stop the recording, and then I'll be around for a couple of minutes if you have any questions.